Hi, I'm Teresa. Welcome to Cocoon Cast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we'll be discussing the documentary Carlos. Teresa, let's get started.
Carlos Santana is considered one of the most iconic guitarists of the last several decades, but he's kept his life to himself for a large portion of it. With this documentary, Carlos unveils the journey he's taken to become the household name he is today, as well as the insights he's gleaned along the way. Rebecca, tell our cinema community why you chose this movie.
I was really excited when you pitched this to our Cocoon Cast team because Carlos Santana, in a word, is talented. Every time I talk to somebody about Carlos Santana, whether it's just a regular music conversation or even in the discussion of this film, that's the number one word that comes up. Talented, gifted. Everybody's blown away by how good this guy is at music.
Well, and he is, clearly. And his career spans, where are we at now? He is in his 70s. And he has been doing music, learning music when he was 5. He learned to play the violin from his dad. Play the guitar, I believe he was about 8. And how many Grammys has he won? 10 Grammys at this point? So the fact that he is iconic, the fact that you've heard about him forever and ever and ever and ever, clearly he's been active since 1965, which is the year my middle brother was born. So that tells me something, right? Over 50 years. More than I've been alive, the man has been performing.
Well, and it's not like he went away, he came back. He's constantly moving.
That's a great point. Because he doesn't go away, even though there's some parts of his life that were pretty private. I know he is an open person or an open book, right? Meaning he's not hiding his life. He's not trying to not be there. But I also know his memoirs came out in 2014. It was The Universal Tone, Bringing My Life Story to the Light. And so he is open about his life, and he is very open in this, we call it the rockumentary, because there is a lot of music. I understand a lot of the footage was unseen up until this point.
To me, that's wild because a lot of the footage that is taken and shared in this movie is from these iconic concerts that are associated with him.
Oh, right. Like Woodstock, for one, when he was at the Fillmore, when Bill Graham was mentoring him. I don't think I knew how active Bill Graham was in mentoring him in the Bay Area or in San Francisco. That was interesting to me. And, you know, if you're a Carlos Santana diehard fan, maybe that's knowledge to you. Maybe that's something that you already know. But I didn't realize how impactful he was to his life, how many different iterations of bands. He was with Neil Schon at one point. He was part of Journey. I'm like, that I knew. He's played with Eric Clapton, John Lee Hooker, Michael Jackson.
You name it. It's pretty great having the odds in your favor that Santana has played with him.
No, and that's true. And if you think about that, he's won 10 Grammys in his lifetime. Amazing. And you think about just the different genres of music. It's Latin rock, he plays blues, he plays rock, jazz, fusion. He is so incredibly versatile. And this movie, I really believe, captured that.
I was pleasantly surprised about that too. I was kind of worried they'd only focus on, say, his relationship with his first wife, who was there for him in like the 70s and
right, mother of his children.
Yes, Deborah Santana.
Correct.
She's pretty well known in her own right, especially in the social justice circles.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
I was so worried that they were going to focus on specific points in time in his early career and kind of ignore almost the revolutionary composing that he did in the middle, but I was really pleasantly surprised to see it bridge all the way through.
Well, and I love the fact that they did talk about his second wife, Cindy, and Cindy Blackwell Santana, right? She played with Lenny Kravitz for, I believe it was like 18 years, has some solo career. She played with him a bit.
They actually show footage of Cindy playing.
Oh, I know. And you
that
were so
blew
impressed. You're
my
like,
mind.
whoa! And she is, 63? And she is still on it.
I was just amazed at the care that was taken to show you the complete picture of Carlos's life. It's not just Carlos is playing guitar. Carlos is doing this. It's like No, you want to know the man? Watch this documentary.
Well, and his sisters, two of his sisters, obviously his parents have since passed, but the snapshots, it was almost like looking. I know when I was growing up, we had a photo album that had all of our pictures. It was the White Album, not to be confused with the Beatles rock album. But the White Album was our family photo album, and there were pictures that Carlos was showing us, and pictures of his mom and pictures of his dad. And I just kind of laughed. It was almost like we're flipping through Carlos Santana's White Album.
I thought it was really cool, too, that Carlos went into detail about the influences for him.
Well, and his
and
parents.
they played like little snippets, so I can hear this later and go, that sounds like that song.
Well, in the relationship with his mom, I think was a little less complicated than the relationship with his dad. But he was very open about that. His siblings were very open about it. It didn't feel like he romanticized his life, but it also, it's just, a lot of things were just matter of fact, right? Him playing at Woodstock. There was obviously footage from Woodstock. I thought that was great. And obviously Woodstock happened way back in the day, right? Back in 1969. But then it fast forward to 2000 and his, comeback with the Supernatural. And
That's where I know him from.
well,
mostly,
but that's
which
the
is
whole
weird.
thing. And I have to say, he never really went away. So I use the term loosely as a comeback, but I think that put him more in the mainstream, and just, he won 9 Grammys for his band and for the music, but 8 for himself. And then he went on to the Latin Grammys, won another 3, Record of the Year. I mean, clearly he never went away. And we're in 2023. The movie just came out. In 2021, he signed another global deal so he can release the Blessings and Miracle album. And it's just, there's just no stopping him at this point. I don't hear him say, hey, I'm getting ready to retire. I hear, here's my life, here's my family, how well he spoke of his former wife, how well he spoke of the relationship he had with his dad. His siblings were just joking around with him. I mean, there was a part where he's sitting in this chair. It looks like in the backyard, and, there's a little fire going in the background. And it just felt like it was like you and I talking.
I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about this documentary is it's so easy to get lost into the myth that it is Carlos Santana, but it really personalized him.
I agree. And I know you and I were talking, and you were thinking we had reviewed the Stop Making Sense, the Talking Heads movie, just very recently. And you were saying, oh, I was thinking this might be just only the music, but it truly is a rockumentary. There's music, but there's very much the story of him. So if you want to know his story, this is the movie to see, in my mind. The
documentary part is a little misleading because documentary usually is assumed to take place in a certain point in time. And this is more of a retrospective for me.
That would be true. And Rudy Valdez, you're familiar with his work. He directed this movie.
I believe he directed The Sentence. That was the one about his sister, right?
Correct. The Sentence actually won a Primetime Emmy in 2019. So he's no hack, right? He knows what he's doing. And honestly, and that's what I was saying, I just felt like the directing, obviously you need directing to move you and to move the story along. But it really felt like I said, flipping through his photo album with the music in the background. And I love his music. It's just amazing. And I know you and I have talked about it. One of the blues guitarists that I love is Stevie Ray Vaughan. And obviously he's since passed, but B.B. King, your dad and I've seen B.B. King. And just the influences, you just hear it. And it's not just blues music, right? There's the Latin music, there's the jazz music, and the talent. And it is, like you said, the versatility for somebody to be able to play all different genres over the course of his lifetime at this point, right? He is 76 years old.
Well, it's wild to me because you introduced me to Carlos Santana's work initially.
Sure.
I have a friend of mine who also played some selections from Carlos for me a number of years ago.
Sure.
And I'm like, this is the same guy?
That's the point, right?
He does so well in different wheelhouses.
Well, and I think the part that's unfortunate about this movie is where we are locally, we have access to several IMAX theaters, Dolby Cinema. However, this was just playing in one of the local theaters, actually one of the smaller theaters. And my understanding, it's still in limited release, although it went from a few times to 5-6 times at some of our local theaters.
That's my understanding as well, that this is a limited release. So definitely, if you can get your hands on it, take the time to watch this one.
I would agree with that. Do we have any questions from the box?
How much of the movie was as music and how much was documentary, and how was the balance for you?
I'd say it's a 70% documentary, 30% music.
I would agree with that, but I also think that because the music was dispersed throughout, it felt like there was more music, but there was less performance. Even on, as we were talking about, you know, in 1999 and the Grammys, I mean, it still was just a small little snippet. It didn't feel like it was leading up to one big event, which actually kind of surprised me, or wasn't leading up to the one big concert. And even Woodstock, there wasn't as much as I thought there would have been. Do we have any more questions from the box?
What do you think was the most surprising thing you learned about Carlos with this movie?
I was surprised how much Carlos's thoughts took a front seat to his music. Normally with musicians like this, I see the music is the pursuit. It is the goal. But Carlos is focusing more on himself than his music. And I thought that was a nice change of pace.
I was honestly surprised, and I do know him to be kind, and he lives in San Francisco Bay Area, you know, has restaurants, he has other endeavors. And I've always heard he's such a kind, welcoming individual, and it really felt that way. And I think for me, I don't know if it was surprising, but it was very kind how he talked about other people, and even people that have, you know, hurt him or, you know, had a poor relationship with, just how kind he was to people.
I could see somebody in his position easily taking the tack of, well, I'm big and famous and talented and they're not, so the.
No, I agree with that. And the spiritual piece for him was so heavy and so powerful as well. And I appreciated hearing how he chooses to write, how he chooses to live his life. And obviously that clearly informs him as well. Rebecca, it is that time of the show where I have 5 moths dancing, singing, playing guitar, just like Carlos Santana.
Wow, very talented moths today.
I was going to say, we have very talented moths today. 1 to 5, what would you give this movie?
I'm going to give this a 3.
Okay.
It's being marketed as a documentary. And the problem I have with some documentaries is they are leading to a certain event in between all of the little tidbits and snippets. And I think as a retrospective for Carlos's work, this is great. But as a documentary, it's something else. It's more of a rockumentary, as we've been calling it.
That's right. That's right. And would you recommend this movie?
I would specifically recommend this for people that are kind of curious about Carlos Santana or longtime fans.
And if you know nothing about Carlos Santana, what do you think? Do you think someone would walk in and enjoy that, or?
I think they'd find it interesting. Carlos has dipped his toes in so many ponds, I've lost track.
No, I would agree. And just for our cinema community, this movie is rated R. There is some language, there is some drug content, and there is some brief nudity, and that's more, of course, right, the Woodstock experience.
But there's also some very mature topics discussed as well.
There's some very mature topics discussed, so I would agree with that. I would actually rate it a bit higher than you. I would say it's a 4. And clearly, I'm a fan. I love his music. But to me, as a documentary, it actually did what I had expected it to. But beyond that, it was like, oh, wow, you're going to see family pictures. Oh, you're going to talk to his wife. Oh, you're going to talk to his family. And you're going to sit down with him. And it was part of Imagine Documentaries, which is Brian Grazer and Ron Howard. And I do think they do a really good job capturing people well.
So for you, this was kind of like a look in the mirror that is Carlos Santana.
That's a good way to say it. So it's a rockumentary, looking in the mirror, and it's a 4 moth for me. Thanks for joining us. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
Watch the notifications for our review of the new movie, The Kill Room. Then come back to the channel this Saturday for our weekly show, Movies and More, where we will have more movie reviews, the latest Hollywood news, and commentary with snark meant to amuse.
Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share our channel.
If you enjoyed this movie review, you might click the link to check out our review of The Creator. Or click the other link to watch last week's show, where we review the concert film Stop Making Sense, re-released in theaters in 4K.
Remember, cinema community movies are
Better together.